session. It's our pleasure to welcome you all to the second edition of Leads 2021, FICCI's Global Thought Leadership Initiative, curated to evolve a shared vision on the future of partnerships. This is the 10th session on the second and final day of Leads 21. We discuss the future of global governance and development partnerships. We are honored to have amongst us esteemed dignitaries and speakers from India and overseas. I request all participants joining us from India and overseas to make their interventions during the open discussions by sending us questions on the Q&A feature of the platform that you're logged in. We also encourage you to complete the online poll that is live right now. We reveal the results of the poll at the end of the session. May I now invite Mr. Harshvardhan Neotia, past President FICCI and co-chair FICCI Forum of Parliamentarians and chairman of Ambuja Neotia Group, for setting the tone of the session. Over to you, sir.
Namaskar. Dr. Rajiv Kumar, His Excellency Mr. Suresh Reddy, His Excellency Mr. Vincenzo Di Luca, I am not sure whether he has joined in yet, Dr. Jyotsna Suri, Dr. Vinay Sahasrabudhe, Member of Parliament, Shri G.C. Chandrasekhar, Member of Parliament, Ms. Margareta Kaderfeld, Member of Parliament from Sweden, Ms. Clarissa Gartohino, Member of the Chamber of Deputies of Brazil, Senator Mark Warner, the Right Honorable Lord Howell, and Mr. Julian Lesser. A warm welcome to all of you, ladies and gentlemen, from across the world. Virtual greetings are in order. Thank you very much for joining Leads of the FICCI initiative. We are truly honored and privileged to welcome Dr. Rajiv Kumar, Vice Chairman, Niti Aayog. It would be a great pleasure, sir, to hear about your vision on the future of global governance and development partnerships with an emphasis on economic diplomacy. We are also delighted to welcome two diplomats in our midst, His Excellency Mr. Suresh Reddy, Ambassador of India to the Federal Republic of Brazil, and possibly Mr. Vincenzo Di Luca, Ambassador of Italy to India. Global governance brings together a diverse set of state and industry stakeholders to further a shared vision on inclusive economic development. It aims at collective actions to provide global public good, open markets, and unified standards for industry. This spotlight session would deliberate upon the future of global governance and development partnerships, along with the role of the private sector. It would bring together a cross-cultural group of parliamentarians, policymakers, and industry stakeholders from around the world to reimagine global governance mechanisms for sustainable and inclusive economic development in these uncertain VUCA times. We are honored to have the eminent speakers and parliamentarians from key partner countries. We look forward to listening your perspectives on this important subject. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. May I now invite Dr. Jyotsna Suri, past President FICCI and co-chair FICCI Forum of Parliamentarians and CMD Lalit Suri Hospitality Group, for a note of welcome. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Sushma. Dr. Rajiv Kumar, Vice Chairman, Niti Aayog, Government of India, my colleague Harsh, esteemed members of Parliament from India and overseas, and all of you who've logged in from across the world. Namaskar. I'm extremely happy to welcome you all to the second edition of LEADS. LEADS is an acronym for leadership, adaptability, excellence, diversity, and sustainability. The theme this year is Future of Partnerships, through which we will reimagine the world. The program got off to a great start yesterday, focusing on economic synergy across different regions from east to west. The session on future of global governance and development partnerships is unique. Organized through the FICCI Forum of Parliamentarians, it transcends geographies, and leads to a convergence of industry policymakers and legislators. At FICCI, we believe in diversity and inclusion and feel that global governance can be enhanced through multi stakeholder partnerships. We are organizing this session under FICCI's Track 2 initiative, the Forum of Parliamentarians. India is the world's largest democracy, and FICCI, as the National Industry Association, believes that it is important to have channels not only amongst official political channels, but also among elected representatives of industry and society. This session is our modest effort in that direction. As an inspiration for today's discussion, I leave you with a quote of Juan Somavia, the former Director General of the International Labour Organization. He said, "What we need is political leadership which can give guidance to the development of global governance. We need business leadership which goes beyond shareholder value to understand the needs and fears of other stakeholders and their communities." I look forward to hearing the views of our esteemed speakers. Thank you once again for joining this initiative. Namaskar.
Thank you, ma'am. It is now our privilege to invite Dr. Rajiv Kumar, Vice Chairman, Niti Aayog, Government of India, for a keynote address. Dr. Kumar is a Vice Chairman, Niti Aayog. He is also the Chancellor of Gokhale Institute of Politics and Economics, Pune. Dr. Kumar has served in the Ministry of Industry and the Ministry of Finance, Government of India, as economic advisor and as an independent director on the central boards of the RBI and SBI. He has vast experience of working in government, academia, industry associations, as well as international financial institutions. Over to you, sir.
Good afternoon, everybody. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, friends, ladies and gentlemen. It's a real pleasure to be here at the FICCI Leads Forum and to reestablish my ties with an organization that I've had very close ties with in the past. And I want to first and foremost congratulate FICCI for picking up a topic, reimagining the world, because I think this is what we need today, which is that the corporate sector must take the lead, must come on board, must be on the platform to reshape the world order. But I think all of us have tried, the governments have tried, the multilateral forums have tried, but so far I think both in India and in the world, the corporate world has actually not lent its shoulder to reimagining the world order, which is so much needed today. And I think, and as I'll conclude later on, that if the direction is known, if also the measures are known, but if we don't have a success, maybe it is because one of our principal stakeholders in reshaping this world is yet to come fully on board. And I think to that extent, FICCI has shown that the corporate world would do well to not just focus on the bottom line, but also to focus on this big macro picture where the world requires to be reimagined and the global leadership and global institutions need to be changed. So congratulations. Friends, we are emerging out of the COVID crisis, the COVID pandemic, and I think we can see that the economic recovery is strengthening. So I think this is the opportune moment to prepare for the post-pandemic era, as it were, before that, and learn the lessons from it. I know that we have to be cautious, but the fact is that this is now the time to put our thinking hats on and start reimagining what the global order and global world should look like. But and we need to therefore think beyond the pandemic. And I think one of the critical conditions for a change world order, and I want to emphasize this because I see this, change. I see this not being emphasized enough, is that a global world order, a new world order, will happen only if we maintain the openness that has made us successful in the post-World War II period. It is increasing openness. It was the flat world which Thomas Friedman talked about that helped us achieve all the successes that we've done in the last 7 decades. And this is today under threat in some sense. I see some, in the flat world, some precipices and some peaks emerging in areas where they were never ever thought would emerge. And I think we have to put our heads together, put our efforts together to make sure that the earth remains flat, the world economy remains open, liberalization and multilateral order retains its place, and we do not get into a situation where we sort of shut ourselves behind closed doors and sort of say that we for ourselves and not all for ourselves, as has been the case so far. And I think I can't re-emphasize it enough, but I do think that this is the critical condition in which SMAC, as Vicky has pronounced it, the areas of social mobility, analytics, and cloud will work, and not in a situation where we're all thinking only in very narrow terms for ourselves and not for the global community as a whole. In the limited time that I have, I want to make 3 points actually. First, that the global institutional mechanisms, the global international organizations, they had a major role as this was conceived after the Second World War, the Bretton Woods organizations, or the UN or the WTO, whatever you have. And one of that major role was convergence across the countries, convergence across income classes, convergence across different categories of countries. I'm afraid that's so far not been achieved. And I can't give you a better example than the fact that the recent data, as of 12th of September, put out by the World Global Data, the organization, 120 per 100 population. In the upper middle income group, it's 115 to 100 population. In the lower middle income, it drops to 38. And then in the lower income countries, it's bare 3. Now, the fact is that this pandemic, which is the classical public good in this sense of public bad, and which shows that you cannot do it yourself. You have to take care of everybody, because wherever the pandemic lurks, it threatens everybody else. Even here, we've not so far been able to achieve the kind of convergence. World order, the way it is, has not been able to bring about the convergence across various dimensions, and especially across looking at public goods that we need to be tackling, and therefore it needs change. The second point that I want to make is that global institutions now still, despite what we have done, global institutions need to be strengthened and not need to be knocked about. They need to be promoted, because they are only what we have got. They have to be improved, and I will come to that in my third point. And they have to be made better, more effective. And as our Prime Minister said at the recent G20 meeting last year, and then again at the BRICS meeting, they have to be made more effective, but they have to be strengthened. And the first opportunity facing us is COP26 in Glasgow in November 2021. That's the opportunity where our global leadership can display its commitment, and can display its commitment that the world, that these organizations, that the global community can play that role of saving our planet from the dangers that the IPCC report has pointed out. It is so important that we do that, and that we do make our commitments for the financing the green growth. We make our commitments to financing the measures for mitigation and adaptation, and all the commitments that have left so far been unutilized need to be made there. I think this is the opportunity, and I hope COP26 will display a new kind of global leadership that we are going forward. Because, ladies and gentlemen, I must say that it could be too late quite soon, and we can't afford that. And India, has made its commitment. We are trying. We will do our better than what we have committed, under Paris. and I think our Prime Minister leads the way in renewable energy, in green transport, in electric mobility, in solar, solar energy, etc. The third point, and I think I'd have to end there, is that that India has been a votary since the very beginning, since our independence, of the strong multilateral fora, and multilateral forums which are effective and which promote, as I said, convergence and the protection of and the promotion of public goods. And I think here the PM, as I said in the G20 meeting last year, said that effective global governance and reformed multilateralism has to be the key going forward. And I think he reaffirmed that at BRICS. I think these are the two mantras that we need to take. And this is what we need to think about in this forum and in others as we go forward. Now, what do we mean by effective governance and reformed multilateralism? The first, of course, is that we must recognize that these are very, very turbulent transition times, technologically, socially, politically, environmentally, etc. And in these transition times, we need our global institutions to be nimble, to be sensitive, to be responsive, and to the entire community, the global community, and not be captured by a handful of countries or power that we do. Now, how do we do that? How do we do that? And I think the best way, the surest way of doing that is to make sure that those who represent the large majority of the global population are represented there. We also have to make sure, and that's the way we can do it, that there is a deep recognition in these global forums of the transitions that are going on, and that they should create an agenda, whether it's an artificial intelligence or its impact on employment, or is the solar, or is the climate change, or the green energy, and that agenda should be brought up front for all these forums. And I think what we have to emphasize is that business as usual will not do, absolutely will not do. And we have to think fresh, and we have to think boldly, and we have to be not scared of saying as to what will happen if other countries join, or if the leadership comes from more heterogeneous set of communities than what we've got so far. And I think this is what the BRICS summit, which was recently concluded, said itself. That is what the reaffirmation that it does, that it made. And I think, ladies and gentlemen, that we need now to build new coalitions, if possible. And that's my last point. I think the world has so far been too divided, between them and us, and then them and us is defined differently, etc. I think there's a need today for new coalitions, maybe the coalitions of intermediate powers, as we said, which are not trying to fight for hegemony or a hegemonic position, etc., but those powers who respect the rule of law, who respect the rule of multilateral forums, and who will come together who will come together with this explicit objective of serving the global good and serving the global community and taking it forward. I think that's the idea whose time has come, and I think we must all work towards that idea so that we can make, as it were, as Minister said, global governance more effective and reform the multilateral institutions so that they don't become, they don't retain their sort of their inertia at this moment and can respond to the changing times, which I call the transition times, and Fiki calls it the VUCA. Thank you all very much for listening to me and giving me this opportunity. Thank you.
Dr. Kumar, thank you very much for that keynote address. I'm sure that several of our speakers and later on Mr. Neotia will also take up several of these points during the discussion. May I now invite Dr. Vinay Sahasrabudhe, Honorable Member of Parliament from India, for his address. Dr. Sahasrabudhe is a Member of Parliament from the upper house of the Rajya Sabha. He's the president of the Indian Council for Cultural Relations, ICCR. He's also the chairman of the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Human Resource Development and the honorary director of the Public Policy Research Center in India. He's the national vice president of the Bharatiya Janata Party. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Thank you very much for inviting me. Shri Rajiv Kumar ji, Vice Chairman of the Niti Aayog, Shri Neotia ji, Srimati Jyotsna Suri ji, all other dignitaries present over here, excellencies, ambassadors, ladies and gentlemen. That the FICCI India is discussing future of global governance is in itself very important because it is indicative of India's growing self-confidence and also its keen desire, in a way, to play a key role in global institutions and thereby in global governance. In Indian philosophy, if I may bring it over here, governance has always been more about responsibility and less about power. In India, even kings were democratic at heart. Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, a king known for his adherence to principles of good governance, some 4 centuries before, had described a monarch as, and I'm using the Sanskrit term, towards power, which essentially comes from Indian philosophy. Hence, it is very natural that both our view towards and our expectations from global governance organizations are obviously influenced by effectiveness and efficiency, and more importantly, accountability and transparency, as well as responsiveness. It would not be wrong to expect that global governance mechanisms strongly reflect these elements of good governance in their functioning as well. Today, incidentally, we are observing World Democracy Day, and somebody told me it is also Engineers Day. So perhaps it would not be wrong to point out that we have to re-engineer our governance mechanisms in such a way that they become more democratic as per the global aspirations. Friends, global governance organizations must establish, I believe, a tradition of genuinely working with collectivism and democratic principles as well. Indian traditions have taught us to look at the entire global community as one family. Naturally, we expect that all family members are treated equally. Young millennials today are perplexed to know that few powerful nations have a veto power even in these days of democratic decision making at the global level. Persons manning global governance have a specific role. They have to have empathy towards the less fortunate sections of the global community. The need to know, they need to know that what it is like facing deprivation, injustice, or insecurity of any kind. Empathy is a value that many sociologists have found to be in short supply in the changing societies. Therefore, leadership of global governance institutions will have to go extra mile in ensuring that their decision making echoes the pains of the underprivileged. Democracy Day today is the right occasion to rededicate ourselves to the cause of moving towards ensuring economic and social democracy as well, moving ahead of the political democracies that are now well entrenched, well established. Lastly, I would also like to bring in the subject of culture because I believe that global governance and development partnership should also take into consideration the cultural aspect of partnership. It wouldn't be out of place to mention here that spiritual and cultural democracy, where every spiritual stream is treated with equal respect, provided equal security and given equal opportunities is the need of the hour. Let us remember that spiritual democracy is the only guarantor of sustainable pluralism. If the corporates of the world try to evolve a different model of global governance, taking into consideration the changing situation and the need of the hour, I believe we can really move towards maximum governance and minimum government. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for that. May I now invite Ms. Margareta Cederfelt, Honorable Member of Parliament from Sweden. She's also the President of Parliamentarians for Global Action. She has served as a member of the Executive Board of PGA and Treasurer previously. She's also the President of the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe Parliamentary Assembly. And she served as its Vice President till very recently. She is a member of the Committee on Foreign Affairs of the Swedish Parliament. Ms. Cederfelt, floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Madam. Distinguished participants, excellences, ambassadors, parliamentarians, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for inviting me to take part in this important conference arranged by Leeds. To take part here is a great honor for me. And I must tell you that I'm quite familiar with India because my daughter has studied in Pune for 3 years at Symbiosis University. And by that, I learned to know India, its friendly people, and the culture. I am very honored as President of Parliamentarians for Global Action to be invited to take part in this panel. Parliamentarians for Global Action is the largest NGO, non-governmental organization for parliamentarians globally. PDA have members from more than 135 countries, also from India. And we have had Indian MPs in our executive board. And I hope there will be MPs from India again in our executive board. I think the topic for today is extremely important. And democracy, rule of law, peace and security, and freedom is very important today. And I have noticed worldwide that these values have increased during centuries, but today there is a backlash going on. And I see this as very sadly because as an elected parliamentarian, I am elected to serve the people. I am elected to provide good living circumstances. And I think a single country is not enough. There need to be agreements, to be engagement worldwide. I would also like to say that it's an honor to take part in this event, as India is the largest democracy worldwide. And I know that you also are working very well to make the world better, to support fundamental rights for everybody, and also secure that they are safeguarded. And therefore, the vision of Parliamentarians for Global Action, that is an organization of political leaders from all regions of the world, is here to renew its partnership with the Indian society at large, and in particular, Indian parliamentarians, whom I am privileged here to invite to join PDA. And PDA was the recipient of the first Indira Gandhi Peace Prize in 1986 in recognition of the fact that PDA had been convening the Six Nations Peace Initiative. It is time to unite our forces and ensure that our work for democracy and human rights becomes more and more focused and effective. PDA launched a series of campaigns aimed to target global problems with viable and workable global solutions. And I will present some of them for you because I see this as very important for a world that benefits all of us. PDA is conducting a global campaign to fight impunity and prevent genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes, and aggressive wars. It is the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court, ICC campaign. I invite the Parliament of India to support ICC in order to embrace a world order based on law and justice. Second, in the face of discrimination and persecution of LGBTI persons, PDA is conducting a global campaign for non-discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity. Our society must be inclusive and must respect the human dignity of all. Thirdly, PDA is strongly promoting the realization of the UN Programme of Action on Small Arms and Light Weapons and the prohibition of biological and bacteriological weapons. The proliferation of these weapons has dramatic implications for the civilian population. Fifth, PDA is conducting a global campaign for democratic renewal and human rights, including through the dissemination of a global code of democratic conduct. There is no genuine democracy without human rights. In fact, of threats to our global ecosystem, PDA launched a global campaign for the protection of the ocean, which must be safeguarded from illegal, unreported and unregulated fishing and from other forms of massive exploitation. And this is a topic that really I have found out is important for quite a lot of our member countries who are depending on the ocean and what the ocean can produce. PDA has as well other campaigns aimed to protect the most vulnerable components in our society, such as women, girls, boys at risk of being victims of child, early or forced marriage. And we do also actively work to ending death penalty. The annual Freedom House report, Freedom in the World, established in 2021 that the impact of the long-term democratic decline has become increasingly global in nature. Nearly 75% of the world's population lived in a country that faced deterioration last year. This diagnosis is not new. The world has been experiencing steady democratic decline for over a decade, illustrated by erosion of democratic principles, infringements on the independence of the judiciary, rising disinformation, dismantling protection for press freedoms, and repression of vulnerable populations and minorities. These trends have been exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic worldwide. Why is this important for the private sector? Simply, but because a vibrant and functioning democracy fosters growth, development, and good governance. And a committed private sector is beneficial to democracy. Challenging in the democratic space must be dealt with by public and private actors together. Public-private partnership are an efficient tool in the arsenal to align for-profit interests with public ones. PDA therefore calls all the friends and colleagues gathering today at Leeds to unite our limited forces and fight together for the advancement and the protection of human rights, democracy, justice under the rule of law, equality and inclusion, as well as for international peace, security and well-being of all peoples and communities of the world. This is of importance for present and future generations. And when talking about COVID, I was just mentioned that I think it's so important when talking about the vaccine to remember that no one is safe until everybody is safe. And this is also valid for all the other parts I have stressed. Thank you once again for inviting me and PDA to take part in this session.
Ms. Sederfeld, thank you very much for that talk. Our next speaker is Senator Mark Warner, co-chair of the Senate India Caucus. He could not join us due to a time zone problem, but he has sent us a video message, which we will share with everyone shortly.
Hi, I'm Virginia Senator Mark Warner, and I want to commend everyone for attending this 2021 Leeds Conference. I want to give a special shout out to my friends at FICCI. During my time both in business, as governor, and as U.S. Senator from Virginia, I've enjoyed working with FICCI on a variety of bilateral important ties and business developments between India and the United States. As some of you probably don't know, my background before I was involved in politics was as an entrepreneur, as a venture capitalist, originally in telecommunications and then in software systems. And I was very proud when I first became elected governor of Virginia, when I got out of business and went into government, that one of the first places I visited as governor of Virginia was India. I was fascinated with India all my life. I have many Indian American friends. I was proud to be one of the only non-Indian members of the Indian High-Tech CEO Council back in the late 1990s, and had believed when I was governor that so many states were building ties with China and not building those same ties with India. That has obviously changed over the last 20 years, and it's something that is, I think, extremely important. When I came to the United States Senate, I was proud within the first few years to become co-chair of the U.S.-India Caucus, which is the largest bilateral caucus in the United States Senate. And as we think about India's continued emergence on the world scene in technology and defense and education, and America's continued presence in those fields, I think there is an incredible opportunity to bring together business leaders, elected leaders, and think about how we take on the challenges of the 21st century together. Because there are challenges. And one of those challenges is the emergence of technology behemoths coming out of China. Now, let me be clear, when I talk about China, my beef is with the Communist Party of China and not the Chinese people, and obviously not Chinese Americans or members of the Chinese diaspora anywhere around the world. But we have seen a model where within China, they are developing new technology, oftentimes with ferocious internal competition at a domestic level until a Chinese champion emerges, and then that Chinese champion gets virtually unlimited support from the state. A classic example of this is in 5G technology, where Huawei was starting to really dominate the whole sector. I think to counter that, we need to have an alliance of democracies in joint technology development. This would be an incredible opportunity to build upon relations between the United States and India. We've already seen those relations develop with the so-called Quad that involves India, US, Japan, and Australia. But I think we need to be thinking in an even broader sense of an alliance of democracies to combine our technology research, development, and then technology implementation in artificial intelligence, quantum computing, biotech, advanced telecom, beyond 5G, so-called open radio access network. These are all areas where I think India and the United States and other democracies should be able to work together. That means we've got to involve organizations like FICCI, which obviously support Indian business, That's where I think we need to continue to take advantage of this strong bilateral relationship by utilizing the amazing talent in the Indian American diaspora that can help forge stronger ties between our countries, but also emphasizing the need for us to continue technology advancement. I hope this Leads 21 conference is able to discuss and advance some of these goals around joint technology development. I think in many ways, if we look back historically post-World War II, we saw the emergence of military alliances in the late 40s and 50s and 60s to counter the threat of Soviet expansionism. Then we saw economic alliances, whether the European Union or alliances in Southeast Asia on economic matters. I think in the 21st century, as we think about the contest of who will dominate advanced technology, we need to bring about technology alliances. And clearly, China poses, and the Communist Party there poses a dramatic challenge and threat to democracies around the world. So we need to re-engage when we set not only on technology development, but on the standards, protocols, and rules to reflect our values as democracies around transparency, around respect for human rights, around making sure that we realize that we are stronger on a multilateral basis. We then need to think about ways that we can work in tandem. We in the United States have taken a first step towards this in terms of our investments in semiconductors on a national level. We've also started to move in terms of development of next level wireless technology, 5G and O-RAN. Some of those funds that we put forward will be on a multilateral basis to build on this idea of an alliance of democracies around technology development. This is an exciting area, and I hope the Leads conference will explore these notions, and I look forward to the results of your conference and how we can work together in the future.
May I now invite Shri G.C. Chandrasekhar, Honorable Member of Parliament from the Upper House or Rajya Sabha. Honorable Member of Parliament. He's a member of the Standing Committee on Chemicals and Fertilizers. Previously, he has served as the chairman of Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, which works towards universalization of elementary education. He has also served as chairman of Karnataka Urban Water Supply and Drainage Board and as a general secretary of KPCC. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. I would like to thank FICCI for inviting me to this wonderful thought sharing meet. It is a pleasure to meet you all. And I think it is a great opportunity for me to discuss about the future of global governance and development partnership. This particular discussion is need of the hour. Since we are in the mid of global pandemic, we are facing lack of sustainability in environmental, social and governance fields, the sharp reduction in productivity growth, the growing degree of inequality, the collapse of biodiversity we are witnessing. The most immediate challenges is to provide a level of liquidity support to countries ravaged by the global economic downturn. This is the broadest and deepest downturn in the global economy that has ever been seen. The global growth contraction for 2020 is estimated at minus 3.5%, aimed exceptional uncertainty. The global economy is projected to grow 5.5% in 2021 and 4.2% in 2022. It is essential that the policy action should ensure effective support until the recovery is firmly underway, with an emphasis on advancing key imperatives for rising potential output, ensuring participatory growth that benefits all, and accelerating the transition to lower carbon dependence, strong multilateral cooperation is required to bring the pandemic under the control everywhere. Many countries, particularly low-income developing economies, entered the crisis with a high debt that is set to rise further during the pandemic. The global community will need to continue working closely to ensure adequate access to international liquidity for these countries, where sovereign debt is unsustainable. Eligible countries should work with the creditors to restructure their debt under the common framework agreed by G20. There are many issues the entire world is facing. I would like to address here. Many reports says Sri Lanka is facing food crisis, grappling with a depreciating currency and inflation and a crippling foreign debt burden. The country's debt burden has also been growing from 39% of gross national income into 2010 to 69% in 2019, according to the World Bank. In India, if you talk about access to advanced learning tools during the online education classes due to Corona, students from rural schools either has no access or lack of access to advanced learning tools such as digital learning, computer education, and non-academic books. We must ensure that these facilities are made available in high priority basis because India is going to be world biggest nation with a younger crowd by 2025. We'll be having surplus amount of resources. Currently, the multilateral system of trade governance and cooperation for economic growth is stressed. Finally, strengthening global governance mechanism for economic and financial cooperation is a must to achieve the common goal. Organizational resistance to change, migrating from legacy applications, data and application security issue with the productivity has to be resolved to adapt the new changing technologies and work changing environments. A number of initiatives and programs have exceeded expectations and are the source of genuine, transformative, and large-scale development gains. These include lower the cost of the access to vaccine and medicine in the poorest countries, using mobile money and microfinance to drive financial inclusion and small business development, using community-based approaches to tackle malnutrition and sanitation, using cash transfers to enhance food security, use insurance and other adaptations measures to enhance relation to distress and disaster and climate change. I think such as initiatives really added lots of meaning to our life. With this, I wish lead to program a great success and I congratulate all the members of FICCI and dignitaries. I would like to participate in more such dialogues in the future. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Next, we have a video message from the Right Honorable Lord Howell. He could not join us because he's been called away for something at this time. Lord David Howell has served under Margaret Thatcher as a first Energy and Transport Secretary. He also served as the Foreign and Commonwealth Minister of State, the President of UK Energy Industries Council, and the President of the British Council of Energy, and the Economics Chair of the Windsor Energy Group. He has been awarded the Order of the Sacred Treasure by the Emperor of Japan in 2002. May we have the message by Lord Howell, please?
Good morning, and thank you for asking me to share thoughts with you on your very ambitious conference theme. You speak of reimagining the world, but I would at the outset contend that the task is to reinterpret the changed world which is already there, already before us, and to gain much deeper understanding of what is actually happening at every level, from the highest international level between states, shaping global affairs, right down to the down-to-earth level of individual and family and community behavior and the conduct of business. And what I'd ask you first to accept is that the world in all its manifestations and all its relationships has in the last 2 decades or so changed absolutely fundamentally, demanding a total reset in attitudes, in public policies, in the art of governance itself, and in procedures. And I pick out two dominant aspects of this whole swirl of change on which to comment now. The first is that the strongest sources of power and influence in the planet have shifted massively away from the nexus of nations we used to call the West in the 20th century, and potentially, I emphasize potentially, into the hands of dynamic and rising Asia and Africa. The second is that power has shifted not only away from Western governments, but away from all old hierarchies and structures of governance and authority entirely. It now lies increasingly in the hands of groups, cells, platforms, tribes, interests, localities, non-state actors, and violent disruptors, and indeed large parts of civic society, on a scale and at a speed never before matched in history. This explains why just now I used the word potentially with reservation. Governments in what used to be called the developing world, now a blurred concept, have simply not just inherited the mantles of authority, which were enjoyed by Western governments in the past. Whole new skill sets are now required to deliver and maintain frameworks of stability and order, and to defeat constant threats of terrorism within a pattern of legality. And note that I've also not just used the familiar word, oh well, power is going to the people, because in the new environment, it turns out that, quotes, the people, unquotes, has no coherent meaning as a concept. The revolutionary new conditions of the digital age create a whole mosaic of differing peoples with different aims and interests, often in conflict with each other. Those who thought overthrowing past tyrannies and despots would simply bring peaceful democracy and its underlying support of compromise to the streets and to the fore have proved badly and sadly wrong. Unending instability and dispute. Now, new conflicts of forever wars, as they're called, have been much more the pattern. People power is unstable power, endlessly clashing, never settling, and endlessly favorable to violent extremes and the elimination of all middle ground and mediation. This is a new world. It, of course, requires fresh institutions to try bringing some greater stability out of chaos and establish international rules as clear as or clearer than those of the past about behavior under the law. But these institutions are going to be quite different from those we've inherited from the 20th century and demand different methods to succeed. Whether we're talking about security and defense, whether the whole character of warfare has changed, or whether we're talking about new financial and commercial institutions as the old patterns of capitalism metamorphose into something quite different, or new frameworks to uphold human rights, or new forums convened to preserve world peace, the operational conditions in all cases have altered radically. The IMF and the World Bank, NATO, old trade blocs like the European Union, the United Nations itself, are all going to have to raise their game, or they will be superseded. And we can see the new networks of Asia, such as the Comprehensive Progressive Trans-Pacific Partnership, the RECP, the African Union, SAARC, COMRESA, and a whole jungle of other alphabets, and a forest of new bilateral trade deals and agreements, already pushing aside to one side this old pattern and taking its place. There is, of course, much more to come. There shouldn't be any doubt about that. Dictators will continue to fall. Military despots will find they cannot prevail in the way they once did. And popular rebellion will prove far more empowering and troublesome to the to the would-be dictators than it has in the past. And meanwhile, in the
That was a video message from the Right Honourable Lord Howell from UK. It's now our pleasure and delight to welcome and invite Ms. Clarissa Garotinho, the member of the Chamber of Deputies of the Brazilian Parliament. She's a journalist by profession. She graduated from the mandate of a federal deputy to assume the position of Municipal Secretary for Development, Employment and Innovation of Rio de Janeiro. She will be speaking in Portuguese and there'll be consecutive translation. Over to you, ma'am.
Morning. Gostaria de iniciar agradecendo aos organizadores desse congresso por reunir um qualificado grupo de líderes e abrir espaços para debater o futuro das relações em um mundo em constante mudança.
Good morning. I would like to thank the organizers for gathering such a qualified group of experts to talk about this evolving world.
Gostaria também de fazer um agradecimento especial à deputada Soraya Santos, presidente da Secretaria de Relações Internacionais da Câmara dos Deputados do Brasil, por ter me designado como representante no LEADS 2021.
I would like to extend special thanks to Deputy Soraya Santos for designating me to speak on behalf of the Brazilian Deputy of Chambers.
No Brasil, a representação feminina no Congresso ainda é muito baixa. Nós somos menos de 20% dos congressistas e o momento é de estimular o protagonismo feminino.
In Brazil, women are still only 20% of Congress people, and it is the moment to stimulate women's participation.
Pessoalmente, para mim, é uma enorme satisfação participar desse evento que está sediado em Nova Delhi, já que eu faço parte da Frente Parlamentar Brasil-Índia, um espaço onde os congressistas brasileiros discutem e fomentam a relação entre os dois países nos mais diversos aspectos.
Personally, it is a great honor to participate in this event being hosted in India, as I am a member of the Brazil-India Caucus in the Brazilian Congress, where deputies discuss Brazil-India relations.
O debate que está sendo proposto aqui é fundamental para começar a entender como as relações se darão nesses tempos VUCA. O mundo atual tem exigido das organizações mudanças constantes que são necessárias e urgentes.
The world today has required constant change from organizations, both necessary and urgent, for the adoption of strategies that adapt their structures and models to the volatility, uncertainty, complex and ambiguity that the times demand, the so-called VUCA.
É necessário adotar novas estratégias que adaptem as suas estruturas e modelos e também a volatilidade, inconsistência, complexidade e ambiguidade que os tempos atuais impõem.
Deputada, pode continuar, por favor.
Nesse cenário, passa a ser muito importante o investimento em capacitação de pessoas, na ampliação dos espaços para discussão e numa maior atenção aos desejos dos cidadãos, das tecnologias, do mercado e da sociedade, tornando o ambiente propício para que a inovação ocorra.
In this context, it becomes very important to invest in the qualification of people, the expansion of spaces for discussion, and greater attention to the wishes of citizens, technologies, the market, and society, creating an environment conducive for innovation.
A responsabilidade das organizações e das pessoas passa a ter um peso muito relevante. Não se permite mais a falta de compromisso com as mudanças e de alinhamento com a sustentabilidade em seus aspectos econômico, ambiental e social. As influências tecnológicas, políticas e culturais também ganham cada vez mais importância. A indústria, até por uma questão de sobrevivência, tem uma facilidade maior de adaptação a essas novas exigências do mundo contemporâneo. bem diferente dos organismos internacionais que se movimentam de forma mais lenta.
The responsibility of organizations and people takes on a significant weight. The lack of commitment to change and alignment with sustainability and its economic, environmental, and social aspects is no longer accepted. Technological, political, and cultural influences also gain importance. Industry, even for the sake of survival, finds it easier to adapt to these new demands of the contemporary world, unlike international organizations, which move more slowly.
Analisando o cenário atual, a governança global tem pela frente enormes desafios para acompanhar esse processo de mudança constante que o mundo vive. No modo geral, esses organismos foram criados num momento muito distinto do que nós vivemos hoje. O século XXI trouxe novos desafios e algumas estruturas de governança global já não representam mais a dinâmica mundial da atualidade.
Looking at the current scenario, global governance faces enormous challenges to accompany this process of constant change. In general, these organizations were created at a time very different from what we live in today. The 21st century has brought new challenges, and some global governance structures no longer represent today's global dynamics.
Ao longo dos anos, os assim conhecidos países em desenvolvimento vêm representando cada vez mais grande parte da população e da atividade econômica mundial. Para que a governança global possa acompanhar essas mudanças, é fundamental garantir uma maior participação de países emergentes nesse processo. Isso, além de trazer maior legitimidade, traria para esses órgãos uma melhor dinâmica no acompanhamento e na inserção da evolução do mundo atual.
Over the years, the so-called developing countries have increased their share of the world's population and economic activity. For global governance to accompany these changes, it is essential that emerging countries have a greater say in the process. This would bring to these bodies, in addition to greater legitimacy, a better dynamic in monitoring and taking part in the evolution of the current world.
Outro ponto muito importante a ser reconhecido é a necessidade da participação de setores não estatais na busca de soluções. Esses setores, inclusive, já influenciam nas decisões dos órgãos de governança global, mas muitas vezes os fazem de maneira informal.
Another very important point to be recognized is the need for the participation of non-state actors in the search for solutions. These sectors already influence the decisions of global governance bodies, but often do so informally.
A busca pelo desenvolvimento de novos órgãos de governança também pode oferecer maneiras distintas de interação entre as nações e os novos atores globais, construindo um ambiente favorável à criação de outras formas de cooperação.
The search for the development of new governance bodies can also offer different ways of interaction between nations and new global actors, building a favorable environment for the creation of other forms of cooperation.
As casas legislativas também têm que atuar com mais agilidade, seja na confirmação de acordos internacionais ou na produção de leis que estejam em consonância com as deliberações desses órgãos. Pensar políticas públicas que diminuam os hiatos entre o local e o global.
Legislative chambers also have to act with the necessary agility, whether in the ratification of international agreements or in the drafting of laws that are in line with the deliberations of these bodies, to think about public policies that narrow the gaps between the local and the global.
O fato é que somente uma maior participação dos entes estatais e privados, aliada a uma desburocratização dos seus processos, deverá garantir aos órgãos de governança agilidade para enfrentar os desafios impostos pelo mundo VUCA. Assim, será possível buscar a cooperação de estados e organismos privados para encontrar soluções relacionadas ao desenvolvimento econômico e sustentabilidade, que incluam e beneficiem de maneira mais igualitária um número maior de cidadãos.
The fact is that only a greater participation of state and private entities, together with the reduction of bureaucracy in their processes, should guarantee to the governance bodies agility to face the challenges imposed by the VUCA world. It will be thus possible to seek the cooperation of states and private organizations to find solutions related to economic development and sustainability that include and benefit in a more equal manner the greatest possible number of citizens.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Garotinho. Next, we have a message from Mr. Julian Lisa, who still wanted to send a message even though he could not join us for this. Mr. Lisa was elected as a member from Berura constituency to the House of Representatives in July 2016. He has also served as the Executive Director of the Menzies Research Center, and he's a lawyer at the Mallison Stephen Jarts, and was an associate to High Court Justice Ian Callinan. May we have the message from Mr. Lisa, please?
नमस्ते आज मैं हिंदी में बोलने का प्रयास करूंगा ऑस्ट्रेलिया से आप सबका अभिनंदन मेरा नाम जूलियन लीसा है मैं बरारा लोकसभा क्षेत्र का सांसद हूँ मैं पार्लियामेंट्री फ्रेंड्स ऑफ इंडिया का अध्यक्ष भी हूँ भारत के 75th इंडिपेंडेंस ईयर के लिए आप सबको बधाई धन्यवाद Good afternoon. I'd like to start by expressing my thanks to Vicky for putting together this excellent event. I'm so pleased to follow Dr. Suri and Dr. Kumar, who've done so much to advance Vicky's excellent work, and to be joined by eminent panellists from Sweden, the United Kingdom, the United States, and of course India. As Australia's Foreign Minister Marise Payne said in her Indo-Pacific oration on Friday, Australia and India are at their heart both ancient and modern countries and cultures. India's history extends far beyond its 75 years of independence, just as Australia's history stretches back tens of thousands of years, long before the formation of our modern nation. In fact, there's archaeological evidence of connections between India and Australia from more than 4,000 years ago, when there was trade between our countries before either was independent, with the colony of New South Wales trading with Kolkata. And our troops fought side by side in both world wars to protect the very same freedoms we continue to defend today. This long history of engagement and cooperation is now being formalised in foreign policy structures. Australia's strategic alignment with India is obvious. The comprehensive strategic partnership signed by Prime Ministers Modi and Morrison last year articulated our shared vision for a region that is open, free and rules-based. A vision that was further advanced over the weekend when my colleagues, Foreign Minister Payne and the Defence Minister Peter Dutton, met with their counterparts, Dr. Jaishankar and Rajnath Singh, for the inaugural Foreign and Defence Ministers 2+2. This is a particularly important time to discuss this afternoon's theme of global governance. The world faces a time of increased strategic competition. There's also unprecedented uncertainty associated with shifting policy priorities, including the withdrawal from Afghanistan and, of course, the unknown long-term consequences of the COVID-19 pandemic. An important driver of these changes is the strategic recalibration taking place in the United States. The US has been at the centre of global governance for the last century. I welcome continued US efforts in our region and beyond, but I note the recalibration taking place has given rise to an increased focus on burden sharing and increased US openness to new forms of plurilateral or minilateral engagements. The significant growth in China's power is also central. China's capability across all spheres is leveraged in its international relations to build its influence in an effort to enmesh itself as the default strategic and economic partner for countries across our region. China has been increasingly assertive in its use of coercive power, whether it be through debt-trap diplomacy or the spread of disinformation, at a time when COVID makes people and countries more susceptible to these messages. These trends, growing US acknowledgement of the limitations of going it alone, and China's increased assertiveness, has resulted in increasing convergence in ideas between us and our partners, and created an important moment for our regional architecture. You know, in defence circles, they say where you sit determines where you stand. For Australia, sitting between the Indian and Pacific Oceans, the Indo-Pacific is both project central to Australia and India because of our shared outlook on the region, and a statement of geographic fact. As India looks east and Australia looks west, we work together in the ASEAN-centred structures that are essential to the governance and character of our region. Similarly, the Indian Ocean Rim Association and the Indian Ocean Naval Symposium. And as we work together towards a region that is open, inclusive and resilient, we work in structures that are dynamic and responsive to the challenges we face. As Dr. Jaishankar has said, it is multilateral arrangements like the Quad that allow us to work quickly and cooperate meaningfully to see disputes in our regions resolved peacefully and to challenge a might is right mentality or coercive tactics. The Quad is the kind of innovative diplomacy that is essential in the 21st century. When faced with disruptions across our region from transgressions of agreed rules, such as under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, or undermining of norms that impact emerging technologies, we're able to work with partners to respond directly and in a timely manner. It's not just through the Quad that we cooperate with partners to protect the norms and rules that are essential to our region. Each of our Quad partners works also through regional structures like the East Asia Summit, the ASEAN Regional Forum and the ASEAN Defence Ministers Meeting, bringing with us the attributes of democracy, commitment to market openness and pluralism that characterise our countries and make our cooperation so very natural. Similarly, we work through other arrangements, such as the trilaterals of India and Australia, plus Japan, Indonesia or France. These groupings again are an opportunity to address the issues that matter most, whether it be Indian Ocean strategic dynamics or development cooperation in Pacific Island countries.
Thank you. That was the last opening statement of the day. Before I hand over to Ambassador Reddy and Mr. Nyotya, I'd like to share the results of the online poll. And this is actually reflecting on the statements of Dr. Kumar and our Dr. Sahasrabudhe and our other speakers. 100% agree that the development cooperation in the new normal has to be based on a foundation of global partnerships with multi-stakeholders and a greater role for industry. 100% everyone agrees that there is a scope for greater public-private partnership in achieving human development goals, and 100% agree that global cooperation on e-governance will bring about greater inclusion and transparency to the global governance and development framework. With that, I now invite Ambassador Suresh Reddy, who has been with us for this session, to share his comments about the discussion. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Shushma. It was quite a fascinating discussion, and I'd like to first start by complimenting Manish, the team, and Vicky, because today was the day exactly in 1964 that India initiated the ITEC, the Indian Technical and Economic Cooperation Program. And so it is quite significant that today we are having this conversation about how to reshape these development partnerships and how they're getting impacted in today's world. And so I believe it is quite a timely conversation from Indian perspective, especially, not only in the context of what is happening globally around us. When we started the ITEC program in 1964, it was a very modest effort reflecting what India was at that time. But we need to appreciate that today it has grown into over 14,000 participants annually. We are offering scholarships for 14,000 participants from 161 countries. 161 countries, we have more than 100 institutions which are partnering with us, and our annual budget has also grown quite considerably to cover all this expenditure. Essentially, it emanated from our belief that the Indian philosophy that Sabka Saath, Sabka Vishwas, as our Prime Minister also said, and also said by our External Affairs Minister. Now, in this context, when we look at what is happening today, the common theme during the entire discussion, when starting with the wonderful remarks made by Raja Kumar, where he outlined the three key points. Essentially, the fact that there is an urgent need for reform of the international institutions. There is a need for strengthening of them. But importantly, the question is, how do we address this deficit in trust and transparency that is dominating today's discourse? Now, this lack of trust and transparency is also especially is witnessed in the post-COVID world. This has really become the most important discussion point in all debates and all discussions. And this has become even more important because of the impact of technology. With technology, now people are asking the right questions. People have more access to information. and hence they're not willing to accept the existing existing systems or the existing approaches to management or governance structures. And that is why there is an urgent need for also reform of these international institutions. And that is what we have been calling for, a reform of the multilateral system, a reformed multilateralism, so to say. Now, as it has been mentioned by a few other speakers also, that when the institutions were created, they were created 75 years ago. And 75 years ago, the world was different. There was a common will amongst all the leaders. There was a common thought amongst all the people of having a multilateral approach, recognizing that we are working towards a common good, towards the progress of the society across all continents. But today it has become different. Today we are living in a society where the narrow interests of a country are beginning to dominate this global discourse. And hence this is a new challenge, a challenge which needs an urgent uh, response from the leaders, one. And two, in this context, as also correctly pointed out by the distinguished Vice President of the Niti Aayog, that the role of the private sector becomes even more critical. Because today we do need to recognize these challenges are challenges which cut beyond, which go beyond the policymakers, which go beyond the governance institutions, and which has become really challenges which we need to have all stakeholders involved in responding to those challenges. And again, this is where the corporate leadership role becomes critical. And hence, I'm glad that today FICCI has taken the lead in organizing this and bringing in all the stakeholders into this conversation. Thank you again for inviting me to this.
Thank you, Ambassador Reddy. Now I hand over to Mr. Harshvardhan Neodia, Co-Chair FICCI Forum of Parliamentarians, for the session outcomes and the conclusion. Over to you, sir.
Namaskar, ladies and gentlemen from all over the world. We have come to the end of this session. We thought we might have a few minutes of interaction, but it seems that we have run out of time. But more importantly, it's been so comprehensive that I think most of the questions that would be in the minds of various people who are online today would have been answered by one of the speakers. I would like to thank all of you for joining this session. I convey my special thanks to Dr. Rajiv Kumar. Sir, you set the tone right in the beginning, and you have a great perspective, an international viewpoint, and I think your views have enriched us and inspired us. I would like to thank my FICCI team, to begin with Jyotsna Didi for her support as co-chair of the FICCI Forum of Parliamentarians, to Dilip Chenoy, to Manish Singhal, to all the other people who are here, Shushma included, and thank you very much for all your support. A special thanks to all the panelists and parliamentarians who have joined us from various parts of the world to share their thoughts. Leads 2021 has received a tremendous response from Indian and global leaders across the world, and it has become a new platform for FICCI, and we hope that we can carry forward this initiative that we have started, and maybe in times to come, we would also like to do this in a physical avatar and not just in a digital format. Before I conclude, I would like to apprise you that the World Expo at Dubai is going to start very soon, and FICCI is the industry partner. So I would encourage all of you to please visit the Dubai Expo, which starts on the 1st of October and will be on for 6 months up to 31st March. It would be wonderful to see some of you there, and India has a strong participation, and we hope that this will further help in the thoughts that we discussed earlier in this session. Thank you very much once again, and thank you for joining us. I would also like to particularly extend my warm welcome to Mr. Peter Rimmel. Mr. Peter Rimmel, thank you very much. Peter Rimmel has been a partner to FICCI Forum of Parliamentarians for a very long time, and I thank you, Peter, for your support always. Thank you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, for attending this session. Please remain logged in for the next session on future of digitalization in India-Africa partnerships, which will start in a few minutes. This session will reimagine leadership vision in India and the African economies. A special thank you to our partners, Iram Group, TCS, Trigen, Citigroup, Google, Jindal Steel and Power Limited, Vivo, Ambuja Neotia Group, EMS, Grameen, ITL World, Mahindra, NSDL, Panasonic, State Bank of India UK, Sun Group, and Unifor. We also thank the Ministry of External Affairs, Economic Diplomacy Division of the Government of India, Indian Missions Overseas, and Foreign Missions in India, and our global institutional partners. Without their support, this session and Leads 2021 would not have been a reality. Thank you very much.